All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Matt Tillman. I'm the co-founder here at OpenEnvoy, and I'm delighted to have with me today Micky Keck, the director analyst Gartner, primarily focused on procure to pay, including AP automation and all sorts of different solutions. He's got a ton of experience in the space, and we're excited to hear his thoughts. I always learn so much from you, Micky. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be able to share some information today.
Right.
And let me pull up my deck here and
You should be
started. Yep. Let me blow this up. All right. So today we're here to talk about, I know it's autonomous finance. Within Gartner, we call a little more about APA automation. So I want to talk about what I'm seeing out there around what is really the art of the possible. Where are people going and what's the impact of it? So if we start off and just look at the base problem, we think about AP automation. There is a lot of complexity here. A lot of people think it's fairly straightforward and should be fairly simple. How hard can it be? I just capture an invoice, I match it to a PO or another document, or maybe I put it through a workflow. But there's actually a lot going on. Your suppliers have different capabilities. The way POs are set up may or may not be compatible with the way a supplier would produce an invoice. Suppliers present invoices in different ways. In some countries, we have legal requirements around what a compliant invoice looks like. And then we need visibility to the process. What's happening? How well are we doing it? Where can we improve? How do we make sure that we're managing our cash as effectively as possible? And we think sort of bigger picture of how AP fits into the overall finance organization. How are we making payments? But there's a lot of moving parts here that often make AP automation very challenging to get at very high levels. And so that ends up, people are often constantly looking at how do we improve this to get to a place where we can be the most effective organization possible. And there's a real cost to this. So when we look at the cost of not having good automation here or significantly worse automation than our competitors, I pulled some data from, in this case, it was from Ardent Partners. I don't mind using other people's data if they have better data than what I have. But we can see is when we look at if you're a 75 percentile type of company with your automation, $10.73 to process an invoice versus $2.81 if you're in the top quartile. That's a huge difference in cost, especially if I am running hundreds of thousands or millions of documents, right? That's a huge burden on my organization that needs to be taken off. And then when we start looking at, why do these costs come into play? We think about invoice exceptions, how long does it take to process, straight through rates. The interesting thing is I went and looked. Unfortunately, Gartner doesn't have great data on touchless or straight through rates, but that's a real key metric of how many invoices are coming in where it's completely automated and you're not touching that at all. In this case, it's at best in class, all just below 50%, which is actually a pretty bad number, right? How many of us want to be just not even 50%? Everyone else 21%. As I was looking through my data sets from various sources, I had seen numbers as low as 5% touchless rates, and really good, best in class would get up to 30-some%. So either way, those numbers sort of correlate together and is a huge drag, because just imagine if we could completely automate this process, it could take our cost from $10, $11, $12 a document down to under $1 or pennies on the dollar to be able to process. And to me, the other interesting thing there is the time to process. With all these touch points, sort of the little hidden cost is if I'm going from 3 days or less to process my invoices up to maybe 19 or longer, think about the degrees of freedom I have with my cash and how I use my cash. Or could I offer my suppliers things like dynamic discounting or early payment programs where I could more effectively use cash and maybe take some discounts? And frankly, I talk to plenty of people that their process is so prone to touch points and slowdowns that a big concern is they don't pay on time at all. And it affects the pricing and the negotiations they can have with their supply base. So it does have extreme knock-on effects across the rest of the organization without having really good automation or autonomy in this process, right? It impacts upstream to payments or downstream to payments and upstream to how I source, how I buy, my overall supplier relationships, the quality of suppliers I can work with does put bottlenecks on that. So it's not just, well, we might think of it as just an AP problem. It is bigger than just an AP problem. And the solution is bigger than just solving AP and making AP more effective. It makes everyone around them more effective too. So it's a huge place for automation. Now let's just talk through just some of the regular problems, right? So, and this is sort of traditional AP solutions that we've seen, for let's say the past 15 years, versus what we're starting to see over the past couple of years and where the industry really is going. We look at things like capture, right? For a long time, it was, hey, portals will just solve that problem. You don't need to worry about it anymore. The reality is suppliers hate to use portals. It's not part of their normal process unless you have huge market power. Portals is going to be really challenging. Can they work? Sure. Does it require a huge amount of effort? Absolutely. So there's no free move there. And we look at things like matching. Everyone says, oh, that shouldn't be a problem. But the reality is matching invoices to POs, goods receipts, contracts, other documents, really challenging to do, or can be really challenging to do. I just got off a call with another customer. That was one of their exact problems. In POs with thousands of lines, hard to match. And so we shouldn't take that for granted that just having a solution is just going to magically match. Because once again, that's not the reality, but that's the way this industry sort of was positioned. Account coding. So if I don't have POs, so what if I'm a services company or other and I just don't care about POs? Not part of my culture, don't need them. So I need to do account coding. Traditionally, it was a header level. Everything will just work because the world is simple. The real world is actually really complex. And so I need split line accounting at the line level for invoices to really be able to account for everything correctly. And if I don't have that, then I have lots and lots of touch points and I have lots of variability on that can introduce errors and that affects my financial statements. So yeah, that's not a good thing. Auditing, yeah, that's someone else's problem entirely. Who cares about auditing and whether anything coming through is correct or not? Well, guess what? Who are they going after if bad payments come out, coming back to AP and saying, well, I guess you guys need to fix what's happening there. And now you need to claw it back and put all the effort in. And then finally, analytics. What type of visibility am I getting? Well, cycle time should just tell everything. What's my time to process an invoice? The reality is that we need lots of additional information around what's happening with my invoice processing process, what's happening with AP, where are there errors, everything else. And so if I had more information, I could make better decisions. But unfortunately, with traditional API, I don't have that. I'm going to come back to these concepts in a little bit here, but I want to give you some data first. And so Gartner has a rich data set from interviewing CPOs and other finance executives on productivity, what's happening in their organization. And so I just want to share some of those because I think this is relevant to the conversation around if we really went to a fully automated, hey, what would happen? When we look at barriers to worker productivity, number one problem, lack of effective tool set. And frankly, I see this every day. I talk to people that have limited technology around AP automation. And they really struggle with it, right? They're trying to do the right thing, and maybe they have some tools in place, but they're sub-optimized, or they're only focused on one tiny bit of the process, not on the end-to-end problem trying to be solved. And that's a huge barrier, obviously. I find the other thing that was interesting is tendency to adhere to legacy ways of working. And that's one of the things I see in the AP space is even if I put technology in, I often continue to operate as if I didn't have technology. So I don't change policies or update policies or controls that because basically the technology is helping me to control. And so I can certainly see that one. And often that also boxes you into your thinking about what you should be doing technology wise around AP because you think of it just as traditional problem. And often your problems are so big early in the process that you just don't see the problems downstream that if you just fix those could fix that. And so another slice of this, most important access to getting more productive workers. Uh, First one should sort of be a no-brainer. Removing friction, increasing efficiency of work will make workers more efficient. It's sort of like a circular argument there, but ultimately it's true. If we're really looking at our process, where is there friction being introduced? Where is there manual touch points being introduced? And what are we doing to eliminate those? The second thing, sort of the flip of the previous slide, is that augmenting workers with technology and automation. So, hey, if I use automation to remove those friction and touch points, then shouldn't that make me more productive? Answer clearly is yes. But this is what we see out there. And the interesting here is it's some of these are sort of obvious. Because if you even look at the third one, accomplishing workflows in a shorter amount of time, yes, of course, that should make me more productive. Although I might argue maybe I do my workflow quicker, but maybe I'm not effectively using the rest of my time. But some of this idea is, what if I could just at such a significant level remove friction that we can completely rescope what someone's work is? So the exception is working on the AP process. Their normal job is something else that's higher value for the organization. So if we sort of flip it around, then it starts making a lot more sense. So let's talk about, hey, well, does AI make a difference? This was from one of our AI studies. I don't have our N number here, but this was also talking to finance professionals and executives because AI often is thrown around as this magic thing that's just going to magically solve problems. And the reality is technologies have specific use cases where they're stronger and weaker. And so in some cases, AI makes a difference. In some cases, AI does absolutely nothing. In the case of finance and AP specifically, this study also includes some other finance processes. But what you see is around process automation and anomaly and error detection, people come back significantly saying that AI has an impact. And frankly, I see the same thing when I look at the technologies out there and what they can do and the people's success that have implemented them. I get corroborating evidence from the customers I talk to every day. And I especially like the process automation. And as we talked a little about the auditing of how traditionally that's nothing. In the AP space, I see real-time auditing coming up everywhere in all the new technologies. And my question would be, why would I not want this? Why would I not want to catch errors, duplicates, anomalous things in real time so I can resolve them? Why do I need after the fact auditing at the end of the quarter or end of the year? AI provides fairly significant capabilities in these areas. And so we should really be considering them when we're looking at technology in this space. And then when we look at, hey, talking to finance people, how is your technology transformations going? What we see is on the top level, progressing slower than anticipating, but doing it effectively. Now, I don't like the slower part, but I do like the effective part. So well over half say we're effective with it, although it's going a little bit slower. Although you see faster and more effectively is 18%, right? So you add those up together and you're at about 75%. So 3/4 of people that are implementing technology are getting results, right? And to me, that's key because the only reason why I'm buying technology is to get results. Now, I think the key for anyone looking at technology is how do I get from the top bar of slower, but doing effectively to faster and more effectively? And this is one of the areas that I think in the AP space, we've seen so much technology. And I talked about the impact of AI, computer vision, large language models, um, all significantly moving the needle to more success, more successful outcomes, and more consistent outcomes. But also in speeding up the effectiveness, how quickly can I implement the software? And when I started looking at this space over 5 years ago, maybe the average implementation for AP would have been, anywhere from about 6 to 9 months. And now we see that shrink down quite a bit. You go from weeks to maybe a couple months. Now, maybe if I'm a very large global organization, yeah, it's going to take a little bit longer because there's just a huge footprint to deal with. But the reality is, when we look at the median implementation times, they have come down significantly in this area. Now, this slide also looks at things outside of AP automation, and so that may be a little bit what we're seeing is in some other areas, maybe treasury management or just consolidations or other areas that finance deals with. But in the AP side, I think we definitely fit more into that 18% with we can move faster and drive very successful results. So I want to come back to the previous slide and let's talk about what modern solutions are doing in this space. And I left all the same ones up and really what this is. Now, my solution side, not fully comprehensive, right? I tried to keep this fairly simple. But capture, we think about the capture portion of how am I getting invoices? We're not portals anymore. Yes, portals are still out there, but really it's gone to it's supplier's choice, right? Let them operate however they want to operate and send you invoices however they best operate. And AI is going to allow us to be far more flexible with that. Yeah, sure, portals still might be out there and portals serve a purpose. And electronic documents are still going to be out there, but AI can also help us with electronic documents and be able to read those, even if we don't maybe have a formal electronic invoicing path set up. But it gives us a lot more degrees of flexibility. And the thing I like about this is when we think about automating the end-to-end process, we often think within our walls of how do we automate our process? But really, we should be thinking about, hey, we got that supplier out there too. How are we making sure their process is as automated as possible? Because, hey, if we make it easy for them, it's going to lower their cost of doing business with us, and that should allow us to get better pricing, terms, better relationship, more innovation with them. There's a lot of good things with making their life simple too. And so that's one of the things I love about what I see about new modern solutions. Matching now, what we see is a lot of through AI, large language models, by looking at additional data sets, whether it's contracts, external data, other things, what I call intelligent fuzzy matching to allow us to far more intelligently match what is not obvious matches. Maybe even matches that as a person, if I looked at the invoice and the PO, I may have a hard time really understanding, is it a true match or not? Because a lot of times maybe the information on the invoice is 100% correct, but it looks like a mismatch against my PO because maybe the pricing information isn't what I expected it to be, but maybe there's a lot of components of what makes up what the price should be. And we can look at some scenarios like food and beverage where I buy in cases of whatever particular food. I buy a case of beef. It's a certain amount of pounds, which sets it at a certain price. And that's a mismatch, but it's a match at the same time. And understanding that complexity, really where tools are going. Coding. I pretty much anymore don't talk about tools that can't do line level type of intelligent coding in some way. That could be sort of intermediate rules based, but what we see is AI that learns over time And that could be AI learning from your existing documentation that you already have, or watching users as they interact with the tool, along with large language models to far better understand how to actually intelligently code individual line items in a more dynamic way. And what I really like about this is that when we think about our AP staff we have out there, often the sort of the frontline AP clerk maybe is someone newer in their career. Maybe we have a little more turnover there because as people sort of enter an organization in AP, they move on to other areas of finance. And so you get a lot more variability with your staffing level there. This capability and technology allows your staff to be far more consistent, assuming they need to even touch anything. The ideal thing would be is that this is right, and no one needs to touch it because it's understood, and so great, it can just move along. Auditing, I mentioned, real time, AI examination of every document in detail. So if it's coming in via email, does that email header look correct? Are the servers ones we know? Does it match up to who the vendor is, claims to be on the invoice? Is the invoice size similar to what we typically see, is it really outsized compared to what this vendor normally produces for us? All those factors go into real-time auditing to prevent or to control what you're actually paying out before it ever goes out, right? I'd rather raise the question early because clawback of payments that have went out are time consuming and painful. And I'd rather have a stop in my process to resolve that than to have to set up an entirely new process after the fact for clawbacks. And so we see this coming on very strong. AI does a really good job with this because you're looking at lots of data, and far, far better than people who just can't spend the amount of time on every document. And if they did spend the time, it would be so expensive to process invoices. It would be just impossible to maintain. And then finally, analytics. This is one of the things I'm really excited about because it's a real difference maker. Instead of just having transactional level type of analytics of how am I doing, what's my cycle time, what number of errors did I have today, how long is my queue I need to process. Instead, if the process is highly automated, really what we're looking at is when I do have failures, what's that failure analysis? Why did it occur? Is it something correlated with the supplier, with the commodity, with how the PO is set up? Cash management. While AP may not always own the cash, maybe Treasury does, still understanding what cash levels could be if those are combined together is important. How do we optimize things? Because maybe there are places that our process or policy constantly causes stoppages that are not really required. What we look at is like, oh, for this scenario, we always required approval. And what we see is 100% approval rate. Well, do we really need to do that? Or could we just let AI do the approval so that I don't need to do that? So with some setup changes there, further optimizing the process. And I think this is where you get a lot of value add. And this is not even talking about things like just overall analytics of where your spend is going. Could that replace essentially other technology that you bought in other areas because frankly your data is not really clean enough to get a good vision on it? So there's a real frontier here where it's evolving, and we see some solutions out there doing a good job, but most are moving in this direction. And I think this is a big win for finance organizations for their ability to fully automate things, because without the visibility, I can't make decisions, I can't make corrections. And so with this is what I'm seeing out in the market. I think it's really exciting. I think there's that, as we go forward a couple of years, these things up 50% touchless rates, the best in class will be significantly higher. And that will have a dramatic impact on just the quality of how organizations operate, supplier relationships, and just the overall effectiveness of what's happening. And so, Matt, I hope this is helpful to your audience out there. It's a really exciting time right now, and there's just so much happening in the space.
Definitely. Thank you, Micky. And we have a couple of questions, if you can see the Q&A on your side.
Let's
Click
see.
through.
Let me look at the chat here.
Questions for you, definitely not for me. So
That I am not quite
if
seeing.
not, I can go ahead
Oh,
and
I see the
I'll just
QA.
ask.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, what companies do you believe, what do companies believe we have AP under control, need to see or understand or recognize potential gaps or risks in not modernizing their AP process? Well, the question would be is when we look at under control, yeah, and going back to that base metric of touchless rates, where are you at there? Because I would look at that as a core metric. I would look at cycle time for processing invoices as a metric. I would look at my payment on times as a metric of where are we really at with there, right? Let's say you're up in the 90 percentiles there in all those areas, right? That'd be great. Or let's say you're even in the 80s, which across that would be still really, really solid numbers. Um, what I'd be looking at is, okay, what tweaks need to be made to improve that? And this is where some of those analytics come in of where are the failures really happening? Because, for example, we may see that for certain categories, the way, let's say, POs are being set up just constantly causes failures. And if we have visibility into that, then great, we can go and make some changes to how those POs are being set up. Maybe it's constantly with a certain supplier. We can work with that supplier to improve their process. So I think that's one that if you're in good shape, that's a good place to be. But the question would be, okay, based on your metrics, is there an area that could be potentially improved? Because really, then once you're looking at that, then it becomes, how do I start redeploying some of my resources that would be just, let's say, doing transactional AP work into more strategic work of maybe that does go into process mapping and redesign to try and get those next few percentage points out of that. But that's a great question. Let's see. Next question. What do you recommend for non-PO invoices, especially ones where there are multiple lines and or variable metrics in a contract? And this is one that there is. The second part is rather challenging. So we talk about variable metrics within a contract. So I think what you're talking about is variable pricing. When I look out there in the market, this is a newer area, right? So a couple vendors out there right now are handling that. So OpenEnvoy is one. There's also another company out of Australia called Spend Console that is offering that. If we were to look at just non-PO based invoices, who else might do a good job with it outside of those two? Vic.ai has a really nice account coding capability there. So you do have some specialties there. But really what you're looking at, if I was evaluating, I'd be looking at exactly how they're handling account coding and do they offer things like smart workflows where, can I set up some maybe automated approvals based on what's on the PO? Can it smart route to the right people to remove the amount of touch points? But now non-PO backed invoices have their own set of challenges, right? And so often solutions strong in that area maybe aren't quite as strong in PO backed and vice versa. But the other key thing there I look at is real-time auditing. Do you have that? Because essentially POs are a control document, and without that control document, can I do something else? Maybe do I have a contract I can attempt to match up against? A lot of solutions really struggle with matching against contracts, or if it does, it needs to be in a very rigorous format. And so I'd probably look at, do you have, some capabilities there? And often people don't necessarily have their contracts digitized. And so that's often a real blocker there. Let's see, how necessary are people in the process versus just a year ago? Are business users, AP/AR clerks reticent to use AI solutions? And if so, what are your recommendations to clear that hurdle? So the simple fact is, people do not like change. And this is true everywhere. So it's not just a finance AP/AR type of thing. Uh, what I've always found works in these type of situations. One is to make people understand sort of the bigger picture of what's happening with this. Two, the other thing is people, yeah, really need to know that, hey, if we work with this, my job is going to evolve in some ways, and as long as I evolve with it, there's a path forward. Because I talk to everyone would love to remove the amount of people in the AP or AR process. But I find a vast majority of them are not saying, I just want to outright fire them. They just want to move them to other jobs because everyone has needs. There's always gaps in the organization. So I think it's really having a clear vision that and communication strategy of here's how this helps the entire organization. With that assistance, it makes us more effective, which means that there is probably going to be more interesting jobs for you to do, and that we want to help prepare you for those other more interesting jobs because I won't necessarily ever get to 100%. So the job doesn't completely go away, but it can be greatly minimized, and we want you to be able to do other things. And it has to be sincere. Otherwise, yeah, people will try and throw the wooden shoes into the machinery to stop it. But there are certainly with proactive strategies that people can see, yes, I have a path. Then it typically is embraced pretty well. Let's see, what features of autonomous AP, such as reducing errors, improving cash flow, have the greatest impact on enterprises' overall efficiency and success? Um, so I would argue from the people I talk to, their number one problem that they have is literally the very first step in the process, which is an accurate capture of the invoice document and digitization so anything can even happen with that. I talk to lots of people where their touchless rates can't be great because they're talking about 35% accuracy with a capture of the invoice itself. So clearly that number one step, if you have really good technology there, you're going to clear a big bottleneck. What I see is usually when you fix that, the amount of errors you collect elsewhere in the process is relatively lower. And that is the one thing that really impacts your ability, your cycle time to pay, and your ability to pay on time. Because when I see really, really negative companies, it is the cycle time is so long that the suppliers now frankly hate us or really dislike us. And so our ability to have good relationships is significantly damaged. And the access to good suppliers is hurting. That's when you see that fixing that really solves the supplier problem, which is an order of magnitude larger than just the touch points. The improving cash flow, depending on the company. There are plenty of companies I talk to that work on very tight margins, that having the option to offer dynamic discounting or adjust where payment terms are dynamically, getting that capability makes a huge, huge difference with them. It's a bit of an unsung type of thing because a lot of people don't necessarily embrace that. But frankly, a lot of the people I talk to, if over half, I can't process invoices within, it takes me 20 some days. I have no cash flexibility. What my payment terms are is what they are. So fixing it gives you all that flexibility, and that could be a very large advantage. I would argue too that through automation and catching errors earlier reduces disputes, reduces those mismatches, because a hidden cost is all those meetings you need to have with all the stakeholders to resolve disputed invoices or mismatches. And if you can clear that queue, you save your business people a ton of effort, as well as your suppliers a ton of effort. And so you're going to see advantages there.
Well, Mick, that brings us to the end. So sorry if we didn't get to your question, but we're coming up on time here. So thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I always learn a lot, and I appreciate you sharing the third-party data as well, because it's really helpful to understand sort of the opportunity that's in front of some of these finance departments. So I really, really appreciate that. thanks to everyone for joining. And if you'd like to talk more about modern autonomous finance, please do reach out. We're happy to talk about everything from accounts payable, accounts receivable, now including cash application, order entry, and all those other fun challenges that finance teams are facing. So thanks again, Mick, and thanks to everyone for participating. Appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
I thought we had a few more minutes, and as I look at this, I realize I have a huge glare on top of my camera. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay.